Well, hello, everyone. My name is Jim Shine. I'm working with the NASC Origins Committee. We're trying to document some of the early days of constellations in North America. And today I'm interviewing Brigitte Sztab, who is one of our elders. Welcome, Brigitte. And
Thank you. Hello.
You go way back to the late 1990s. So when did you first learn about constellations?
It was in 1997. I was already living here in Chelan, Washington, and was going through a painful divorce. I was talking to my sister on the phone in Germany. That was in the spring of '97, and telling her how hard it was to communicate with my husband. We were separated at the time. And we had little kids, and she said, there is this modality here that these workshops people go to, and you can resolve family conflicts without the person that you have the conflict with being in the same room with you. And I said, that's what I need. So I, on my next visit to Germany, I went to the same teacher, the same facilitator that my sister's boyfriend had gone to. He was in Frankfurt, that's where I'm from. And so I went to my first workshop. It was a Thursday through Sunday workshop. And I was floored. I mean, I was completely, I don't even have words for how I felt, but my heart felt that it had come home. Finally into a space with a group of people where I didn't have to hide it, where all feelings were welcome, where there was honesty and authenticity and truth and trust. And I just loved the work. I loved the intensity of it. I loved the effectiveness of it. So there was, it was like immediate. And that was the first workshop I went to. And at that first workshop, I asked Dietrich Weet, who was the facilitator, if I could invite him to America. Because I thought I have to keep doing this work. I cannot, not leave this be. And there was nobody in America. I've never heard of the work over there. And it had just started to become big in Germany. And the first generation facilitators under Hellinger had started. And so I knew there was nobody in America. And when I asked Dietrich Weet if he would come, he said, yes, if you organize a workshop for me, I'll come. So that's what I set out to do. I was taken into service. There was no choice. I just had to continue with this work for my own sake, first of all. And then I'm somebody, when I find something good, I have to share it. I cannot keep it to myself. I want to share it with everybody that means something to me, and then everybody else as well.
Well, that's great. Well, yeah. So you were into it in 1997 or 1998. That's quite early for here. And I guess. You already kind of answered what drew you into the work and why it's a passion for you, but can you tell me who's, besides Dietrich, can you tell me some of your early colleagues? And I know at some point you became a facilitator, who your teachers were. Was Dietrich one of your teachers, or did you learn?
Yeah, Dietrich, well, see, in the early days, there was no training. Bert Hellinger did not do any trainings. He had developed the work out of other models like family sculpting with Virginia Satir and rebirthing and all these modern modalities in the 70s and 80s. And he said back then, and that's according to my teacher, that he didn't want to do any training because he didn't want people to do steps 1, 2, 3, 4 and read all the books on the book list and do all the assignments and then they feel they have done it. They are now facilitators because they did the course requirements. And he said, if I don't give your mind any course requirements and any steps to follow, you have to follow your heart to this work. And it's your heart that has the connection and that learns from the knowing field. So he didn't do any training. My teacher didn't have any training. He was a trained therapist, but he did not have any family constellation training. So when he came to United States, and that was the first workshop we did was in 1998 here in Little Chelan, Washington. And so I started just watching him. And I also had the good fortune that I was able to stand in the constellations every time with the facilitator. I was not necessarily representing, sometimes I was, but I was right next to Dietrich. His English wasn't very good. So I was standing in the energy as it moves between people, and what he picked up, I picked up because I'm very sensitive. We are both cancers, astrologically. So we were very, very well matched in that way. And whenever I realized or felt that what he meant to say wasn't picked up because he used incorrect grammar or the wrong word, I would, translate it correctly. And then also when I felt people had misunderstood something, I would correct. So I was constantly in the flow. I got the words, all the sentences, they just, because of the repetition, they were then there in my mind. But the thing was that I didn't know what I knew. I had only ever learned things with my left brain. And I never knew that that your kid could learn things in any other way. So after 3 years, he said, Dietrich said to me, I think you're ready to start this yourself. You can facilitate. And I said, no way, I don't know anything. I haven't had a training. I don't know what to do. And it took maybe another, few months or so, but then some people from the group around Dietrich that had formed, in the meantime, we had moved to Seattle with the workshops that I was organizing for him. And Mark Johnson, whom some of our colleagues probably recognize by name, he was in that group, and John Cheney was in that group. So anyway, some of these people in that group said, we are going to organize a workshop for you. And we'll see, then you'll see if you can do it or not, and I was very grateful and also very scared. But I've always said to me, when fate brings you something and lays it in your lap, it's a sign, and I had always said, give me a sign when I'm ready to start this work. And that was my sign. And so I stepped in, and I have to say, it was like a duck to the water, I felt. I mean, I wasn't nearly as experienced or thorough probably as I am now. But, for a first workshop, I felt it flowed beautifully because everything I had learned, all the sentences, it all came together. It all came right back out of me, because I had learned to be in touch with the field. And I've learned, as I say, by osmosis from this teacher who just did his job, So there was and of course we're also friends. So afterwards I got to ask him questions. We talked about the constellations at the end of the day. And that was my training. And when I started to train people in 2004, that's what I then that's how I teach. I teach from experience. Yeah, so pardon.
No, go ahead. I didn't interrupt.
Yeah. So I invited Dietrich to come here for 3 years, and then Anutosh Fu took over as his organizer, and some of the people will recognize and remember her name. And Anutosh then became the sponsor and organizer for Dietrich, and I started my own workshop career. And I was the only one at the time in Seattle working as regularly as I could. It was still kind of hard to get the work up and going because in this country, people want to move 1,000 miles away rather than deal with family. That's kind of the MO in America. If you can't deal with something, you just move away.
Yeah.
in Europe, you can't do that. The countries are very small. You can't get away from your family that way. And people don't have the tendency to want to move from their home and their homeland, their home region, because all their friends are there and all their other relatives, and people don't move around that much. So in Germany and other European countries, and probably other countries in the world in general, you deal with the family because you love them and you want to be with them and you have to be with them. Here, people just move. And so it was like pulling teeth, I felt, in the beginning in America to get people to the workshops. There were, of course, always a group of people who were progressive and open and curious and interested, or pure desperate to get rid of their problems, so there were always a few diehards coming, but we often sat there with tiny groups, 5 people, 6 people. It was difficult because renting a room meant that you had a financial obligation and you didn't know, so many times you had to cancel the workshop and then you were out some money for the deposit. And I know that a lot of my colleagues probably had the same problem at other places in the country. I noticed the East Coast is a bit different, but the West Coast is kind of flaky. Where people, I think I always say people on the West Coast, if there wasn't an ocean, they would have gone farther away from their families.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
When the people on the East Coast, they stay put a little bit better. The family seems to be more cohesive. And I've worked on the East Coast extensively. So that contrast was became apparent to me. And so they tend to be a bit more interested in resolving conflict, whereas here people just move on. And the West Coast is kind of famous for non-committal relationships. So
wow,
it was difficult.
That's really interesting sociology. I'd never heard that before, but you lived it. So you were the first in your area, American, starting around 2001 to start facilitating in your area.
Well,
and
Lisa Iverson was one of the other ones that I have to mention her, because she's up in Bellingham, and the two of us sort of were at the same time. And Jane Peterson.
That was leading right to my next question, which was who were some of your colleagues, like in the we're looking mainly like pre-2005, before the first conference. We're trying to see some of the origins. So Jane and Lisa were 2 of your early colleagues. Any others? Or?
Well, Francesca Mason Boring. She actually was in the training. I think she was in training with me that SNE Victoria Schnabel started. She's from Germany, and she was one of the early teachers here. And Francesca, she was, I think, trained by SNE. And
yes, she was. Yes.
Yes, and then there was a training in Portland that Jane organized, and I just went to the trial session to kind of find out if I needed more training, and I decided I didn't at the time. And so she was there, Francesca, Jane, Lisa. Then we had a Mark Johnson started, I think maybe in 2003, I want to say that he started facilitating 2003. So there was him, and there was still kind of the diehard group that had been around Dietrich when he was coming. And some of those people started to facilitate later, like Anutosh or John. It took him a while, I think, and it was after maybe the second conference or so. But we were a big community, even facilitators and non-facilitators who loved the work and knew a lot about it, and would always show up when a guest facilitator was invited from Germany. And it was really nice to have that very tight circle here in the Northwest. And we had a regional association at the time that we formed. I think Lisa, Mark, Emily Waymeyer, Jane Peterson, myself, and I don't quite remember who else was in that, but we had regular phone calls and even some meetings, just, to see how we could support each other and the work.
And the first North American conference was in 2005, and Jane, I believe, was the
Yeah,
chair of that, and it was in your area, if I'm correct.
that was Portland, Oregon.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So you,
Yeah,
so,
not far from, I mean, I traveled there in 9 hours or so, 6 hours, 6 hours, yeah.
so you guys really were the pioneers in the US. Then the first conference basically came out of you, it sounds like. So yeah.
Yes, it was probably the hub here. And part of that reason was that Dietrich Klinghardt, whom a lot of people might be familiar with, maybe not so much in constellation circles, but he is an eminent and famous and recognized physician, and who deals with chronic illness. He teaches in Germany, he teaches in England, and practices in all these countries, and in Bellevue, Washington, which is right near next to Seattle. And he knew Snee. And Snee and not Guntard, but who's that? No, I can't remember.
Stefan,
the healing power of the past. Who wrote that?
Frankie, Rupert,
no.
Stark.
No.
Okay.
I can go and look at the book.
Okay. Okay.
Take time. Anyway, they both lived in Freiburg, and all three of them were followers of Osho, or at least interested in his teachings. That's how they met, and they were all three therapists and interested in the new modalities. And so that's how Klinghardt had found out. He found out in Germany as well, from his colleagues who had, fallen in with the Hellinger crowd and learned, how to facilitate constellations. And he invited Hellinger over in 1998, and he came to Seattle to do a workshop. There were 50 people. Some people were from Germany, like Heinz Stark. I met him there, and I don't think Snee was there at the time, but Gabrielle Burkhan was there. She's from San Francisco. She was one of the early people offering workshops in the US. And Bert demonstrated the work. He did constellations for 2 or 3 days. It was super interesting to watch him work. And then, a couple months or 3 months later, there was the first workshop where Dietrich came to Chelan. So it all really started, the American adventure started in 1998, you could say. And then Bell Hellinger came back to the States in 2003. Darian Benz and Joanna Chatron invited him to Santa Barbara, California. And there was a bit of a longer workshop with, more of a supervision and training days for Darian's students, university students.
Okay. And so you lived this stuff. This is great. So you started facilitating in 2001, and then if I heard you correctly, you started training people in around 2004. Is that correct?
Yeah. It was, again, it was not something that I had come up with, because I always think, I know too little, and I never get there or whatever. And I did, after 3 years, or like 6 years in all, 3 years learning myself and 3 years practicing, I didn't feel I knew enough to teach. And there was a student of mine, one of the regulars at my workshop, and he asked me, why don't you do a training? And I said, you gotta go to other people. I'm not a trainer. I don't feel I have enough experience. And he said, well, I really like the way you work. I want you to train me. And I said to him, well, if you get a group of 9 people together, I'll do a training. And he actually did just that. And so I kind of feel when the students are there, the teacher must be ready. Again, like it's kind of the same way how I started to facilitate, I was put in my lap, the whole thing, and so then I said, okay, that's the sign, I'm going to start. and to decide how I want to start and what I want to teach was hard, because I am not a left-brained person, never have been. I'm left-handed, I'm right-brained. That's my element. And to write a curriculum and then do a structure, and that's just not my thing. But I thought that's how I had to teach, just like I thought in the beginning that's how I have to learn. And the thing was that while I was trying to come up with some kind of a structure and a plan, at least for the first weekend, I was connecting with my heart with all the people who had signed up, and I felt them while I was writing stuff on my, my cheat sheet and stuff like that. I was already there. I was already feeling the space. I was feeling the people. And after a couple of hours of that, I was like, the day before I left, I started writing some outline. I said, no, I know what I have to teach now. I want to teach how to be in the energy, how to let the knowing field guide you, how to learn from the experiences themselves, and not the other way around. I don't want book learning or structural learning that then informs the experience. I want the experience to inform the more mental part of the would-be facilitators. And that's kind of what I did. I just showed up, and I showed up. I trusted the field. I knew people wanted this. I knew their intention combined with mine would produce something, and it did. It was a really nice first weekend that we had. And I've been teaching ever since, and it's my favorite part of my work because it's always an adventure. There's people that definitely need a different approach than what I'm teaching, that like the very step by step, and then they have a theme for this weekend and a theme for another weekend. What I find is that the students need to first do their own work. They all need to do their own work so they don't have blind spots from their own traumas or patterns or hang-ups or relationship conflicts. So people have to do this work intensively, and a lot of people that come to the training don't. They come to one workshop and they love it, and they say, I want this and I want it intensively. And they may not even have the desire to be a facilitator. I take everybody, those that want to be facilitators and those that just want an intensive. And then we do constellations all day long. And after each constellation, we send the person that did the constellation out of the room. They get to rest a little bit or reflect or take a walk. And the rest of us then discuss this constellation. And it's fresh. And it's like, what did you do there? And why was that? And how does it, fit? All of that, while it's still fresh in my mind, because afterwards I forget all the constellations because it didn't happen in my left brain, right? They happen in my right brain. It's, so we discuss it right then and there. They take notes. They start seeing what I see. And I often don't know what I see because I'm in the moment, and it all comes together. So that to have that live experience and then to dissect it immediately afterwards, without the person that had the experience, obviously we don't want to disturb them in their process. That's the way I teach. So everybody gets multiple constellations in the course of the year. Everybody gets to represent constantly in the constellations, which is, as you know, such a depth experience in itself. It teaches you so much. Then you get to learn how to hold the energy for a whole group. There are things that I explain, kind of like what do I do in the chair? So I explain what do I do in the chair and how do I do it and what do I wait for? So this is kind of my favorite thing in the world, is to teach, to facilitate and help people get really deep with the work really fast without using the mind and any kind of concept, about what a constellation should be or any assumptions.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Is there any, probably not based on what you said, but I'll ask anyway. Are there any from your work with constellations over the decades, are there any like particular variation that you prefer personally, or gems of wisdom, or not really?
Um, yeah, I like classical constellations. I like family constellations. You know, that this is what I've been true to. I don't really do nature constellations. Once in a while, you know, if somebody asks me, you know, I may look at a business setup and you know, I help people when they come to me, but people come to me for family stuff. You know, that
Mhm,
is still what is on everybody's heart, you know, from the time they were in the womb, you know, and
mhm,
that needs to be looked at. And it's the basis of so many other things that happen in life, you know, in business and otherwise. So I
mhm,
think that that's most necessary work. And in the course, I mean, even with Dietrich back then, when I was still learning, he already, you know, was doing blind constellations in his workshops, because Dietrich Bert Hellinger just started to do them. And of course, all of the German facilitators, they always still look to what Bert Hellinger was doing
mhm.
back there. And I really like that. I like the blind, the double blind, and then I like the liminal constellations
Liminal.
where, yeah, it is a term that was formed by one of our colleagues. He's German, is in Denver. Gosh, I'm bad with names. I have to apologize that I can't quote him now and give him credit for this. At least I think he came up with this process where somebody can sit in a chair and just have a feeling, and they may not even know what their feeling really is about. They
Mhm,
may just in there may be something in their life that they can't get to with their mental and state it as an issue or as an intention, right? So they can just sit in the chair and feel that, and then the people in the group just stand up. They stand up, and if they feel like it, and they enter the constellation and they constellate, and there is a picture that starts developing. And for somebody that has that feeling that the constellation responds to and resonates with, they they start understanding the symbology of what they're seeing in the constellation. I often see it too. Once we had, for instance, one of the first liminal constellations was somebody who just sat there, and he said that was at the end of learning circle. He had done multiple constellations on his cancer and his childhood in France during of his father during the war. All of these things, lots of stuff. But in the end, he sat there and he said, you know, there is this thing, I've dread this constellation, I don't even know what it is. So we did a liminal constellation. He just sat there feeling the feeling that he could not put into words. And what developed then was that we saw his twin abort. His twin miscarried, and it was the story of that. There was somebody on the writing on the ground, and his representative in the far corner, and it was so obvious who was who, right, and what was happening. That you know, it was the story of that his heart told, you know, to him and the group, that he had this dread because he was there when his sibling died and miscarried and left and disappeared. And that
Yeah.
was his
Out of the
biggest trauma.
blue.
No wonder he couldn't put it
Yeah.
into words, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
find the missing twins a lot,
Mhm.
but in this constellation, it came about this I'm sorry, I was gone for a moment.
Yeah, we got some technical difficulties, folks, but Brigitte is back now, and you were talking about the twin boarding in the womb and how traumatic that must have been, I believe. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I call liminal constellations. I do those usually only with my students because to introduce that in a workshop when so many new people are sitting there, they'd be too stumped and their left brains would protest pretty loudly. I think that they don't understand enough and then they don't enjoy it. And so yeah, we sometimes do blind constellations though. And I just enjoy the family constellations the most. I mean, there is so much. I've worked in so many different places in the world, and sociologically, it's so interesting to me how different people are. You know, when I work in Germany, and what comes up in German workshops, and how the Germans are, you know, and how they constellate. You know, it's so different. And what happens in America or in South America when I work with an Islamic group of people, Indians that live there. So I enjoy really knowing, finding out, learning about people. I love people. So that's my great joy. And
any thoughts on where constellations might be going in the future, or not really?
Yeah, you know, I was over the 20 years that I've been working, I was becoming so encouraged because it was so hard. As I said, it was like pulling teeth in the beginning to get people to come to the workshops. And then over the years, like in the last 10 years, it got easier and easier. My workshops were almost full. They had a waiting list. I could put on as many as I wanted. I knew that, you know, I didn't have to cancel a single one. And that was really, really nice. But then COVID hit, and I don't know how it is on the East Coast, but here on the West Coast, especially up here in Seattle, where I work the most, I just travel over the mountains, and I'm in Seattle, and that's where I held most of my trainings. And the fear has returned. You know, a lot of Americans, well, people worldwide probably, deal with anxiety. Anxiety medication is the most prescribed medication in the world. That tells you something, right? So when people with that level of anxiety get hit with another fear, as we have with COVID, they are re-traumatized basically, and their trauma becomes active. And when people have active trauma, in my experience, they don't come and work on it because you know there's the fight or flight. There, you know, it's all kinds of, you know, need to be safe, and people are not gonna steer around in their wounds at that time because they have to wrap. And that's kind of where, I mean, just my observation, because my work in Seattle, my group work is basically dead right now. I've been trying to put on workshops, and there's always some people that want to come, but never really enough to make a full group. And so I work basically online. So my worry is that that what we have gained in the last 10, 20 years, you know, in openness and presence and trust and courage and healing has been, you know, in large parts of the population, you know, really set them back and set our work back in that way as well, unfortunately, because that's what we are trying to do, right? We want to heal people, open their hearts, make them come together, you know, to create togetherness as humanity, so we can tackle the problems we have in this world. Now we're all divided and afraid of each other and don't want to even, you know, get in the same room, let alone touch, you know, or hug someone. So that's very sad to me. And I don't know what's going to come in this regard, if we can catch up again, or you know, or how it is in other parts of the country. I know in Germany there's not much going on as far as, you know, the group work, and they're very locked down and afraid of each other and masked up and stuff like that. So, and even on the East Coast where I worked regularly, one of my biggest stopping point was Durham, Chapel Hill, Durham area
Yeah.
in North Carolina. And I always held very long workshops there because there were so many people that were waiting for the workshops always. And even there, there's not a lot of interest right now. So don't know what's going to happen. I keep working online. I mean, that's what people are more comfortable with. And I have years of experience doing that. I've always done it on the side, just a little bit here and there, but now I do it, much more often, obviously. So don't know where we're heading. I think if COVID hadn't hit with all of the mandates and the fear mongering and that hype that I felt was made around it, it would have been very different, because I started seeing whole families heal, one person coming, whole families heal, in the course of, over the years, and then next generations coming. And, it was very gratifying to see that there, I mean, this work is amazing. I'm just still in love with it as much as I was on the first day. It floors me. The consciousness, that an amazing capacity that we have to link up with each other in our hearts and know each other and be connected on such different levels than when we usually connect. That was what floored me in my very first workshop, when I felt my heart had come home, and it's still my heart's home when I'm in the field.
Yeah, they can tell. It's really beautiful to see. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I want to thank Bert Hellinger. He gave us this work, and he could have patented it. He could have, done a whole system out of it, where you have to go to, join association, go to school, pay tons of money, buy all the books. I know healing modalities that are profound, where the founder has done this and they all imploded, because you cannot keep a lid on consciousness. When you offer consciousness work, and most energy healing modalities, are consciousness work. And if you then say you have to do it my way, and you cannot, bring your own into it, and there's only one way, and it's my way, and you have to pay tons and tons of money, so it's prohibitive to even get into it, and that's not helpful. So Bert Hellinger didn't do any of that. He had a modality. He said, see how you find your own your heart's way to this healing work, and then do it. And so he gave everybody the permission to add what they saw, because everybody's consciousness adds observation, right, into the work and what they see. And we have now all these different types of constellations. Victoria Schnabel, she started so many of these, in kind of different ways of using the work, that all wouldn't have been possible if it had been patented and top-down hierarchy of who can do what and how, right? Art, that part is so amazing, really, in this world of energy healing, which is my world where I come from, that I can't thank Bert Hellinger enough that he didn't do that. He just gifted it to the world, and now look how it's spread, in the last 20 years, and how much good it has done. So I want to honor and thank him as part of this interview.
Yeah. Well, thank you for what you've done to get things going here in the US. You're one of the pioneers, and thank you for that. So
you're welcome. I couldn't help it.
Okay. Thank you, Brigitte.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
I'm gonna turn off the recording now.
Yeah, I'm trying.
I can edit that off. That's easy. The end of the end.